Here we go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this session. Sorry for the delay. We had some technical difficulties, but hopefully you can see us. Hopefully you can hear us. If you can hear us and see us, drop in the chat kind of where you're tuning in from and what year you are in your medical school journey. I'll wait just about a minute for sake of time just to let folks come in the chat. And then we're going to kick off and hopefully make up some lost time and hopefully get all your questions answered. Definitely quite a few folks joining. I've got 22 people. If you can see us and hear us, just drop a hi or a hello in the chat. We got, there we go. Ashley, welcome from Dayton, Ohio. Brittany Scott, hello. You can see us and hear us. Great. We got Harry in the house. All right. I think that's a good number of folks, 23, and we are late. So we'll probably jump right into it. I was in the process of preparing some elaborate introductions, but I think our esteemed guest would be best served kind of introducing themselves. So we'll start ladies first. Dr. Okay. Did I say that?
Close.
Close. Okay. How do you say it? How do you say it? Forgive me.
The true pronunciation is okay.
Okay.
So I am Dr. Ayodele Okay, and I am a pediatric anesthesiologist. I attended, wow, how far are we going? So I attended University of Illinois for medical school, Case Western for residency, Children's Nationals DC for fellowship, and then I was an attending at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and then now I'm in Texas at Cook Children's Medical Center. I am really, really, really invested in increasing the number of underrepresented minorities in medicine. Have been working with Tour for Diversity for a few years now, and actually met Dr. Matthews when I was a medical student. So I am really excited to be having this discussion with you guys, and I hope that you are ready to leave empowered and excited about applying for anesthesia.
Dr. Estime.
That was fantastic. I'm Stephen Estime. I am also an anesthesiologist. I'm a critical care specialist as well. I guess if we're going to go way back, I'm originally from Michigan and did most of my school and training there, grew up there. And then I went out to the University of Chicago for my anesthesia residency. I left to go to Brigham and Women's Hospital for an ICU fellowship, and I stayed out there for a couple of years, honing my skills as a critical care anesthesiologist. I came back to the University of Chicago after that, where now I wear several different hats and roles. I'm a trauma anesthesiologist. Again, I work in the intensive care unit. I also serve as a director for diversity, equity, and inclusion in our graduate medical education office. I'm an associate program director for our anesthesia residency, and I also lead diversity efforts at the University of Chicago. It's great to be here, and this is, I think speaking to individuals and trying to give them tips of how to navigate this complicated process is super important, especially if we want to actually measurably increase diversity in medicine. This is the way that you do it. So, thanks everybody.
Fantastic. Such an amazing group. I am Stephen Bradley. I'm an anesthesiologist by training. I attended Howard University College of Medicine, and we got one more amazing guest I'll introduce in just a second, but welcome, John. I know you're on call. Actually, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, Dr. Patton, since I know you're on call and could get pulled away.
Yeah. John Patton here. Hey, I am on call today at our county hospital. Dr. Patton, John Patton, I'm an anesthesiologist at UCLA. I did a fellowship in regional anesthesia and acute pain medicine after my residency at Stanford. I'm currently at UCLA and one of our regional acute pain faculty. I do general anesthesia and OB anesthesia in Los Angeles.
Awesome. Glad you can make it. I'm Stephen Bradley. I'm an anesthesiologist. I attended Howard University for medical school. I went to the University of Chicago for anesthesia residency. That's where I first crossed paths with Dr. Estime. He was my chief resident when I was just starting out. I took a detour after residency, went to the Navy and practiced for a couple of years, and then went back to fellowship at University of Chicago for critical care, where I was again under the tutelage of Dr. Estime, and then just started my first true quote unquote attending job in Tampa, Florida at Moffitt Cancer Center. So excited you all could join us. I figured we could first start, and I do want to make it a full disclosure. Some of our esteemed guests are members of institutions with residency programs. You know, the views discussed here don't represent those institutions. We're not guaranteeing anybody's spots. There's, you know, we have to respect the ERAS process. But we're so happy you're here and we can answer whatever questions that you have. I think one question we can start with, because we actually have, which is very rare, you know, for specialty trained anesthesiologists. So a question I've been asked for people that are interviewing, Dr. Okay, when you were interviewing, did you know that you wanted to do pediatrics, or how would you approach subspecialty training on an interview?
That's a great question. I actually did not want to do pediatric anesthesia because everything that I've done since I was a child was with peds and I wanted nothing to do with it. But when I started residency, it just so happens that as a CA1, they would put me in the peds world, even though I was not supposed to be in peds world. So by the time I did my rotation, they actually thought I had already completed my full peds rotation. They gave me space and opportunity to learn and grow, and I just fell in love with it. And my mentors were exceptional, and I just really valued and enjoyed working with them. I take joy in taking care of kids, and that's how I ended up in pediatric anesthesia. I was thinking I would do critical care, but my path I think it was just ordained to be that way.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And Dr. Estime, so if you're, you know, engaging with folks with the interview trail and they say, I want to be a critical care anesthesiologist or a trauma anesthesiologist or a regionalist, how does that, I guess, help your interaction with them? Does it help? Does it hurt? What would you recommend?
Yeah, you know, my take on it is when I'm one of the things that I'm trying to look for, or I'm trying to evaluate when I'm looking at a candidate that's going to potentially come to my program, is I just want to know that they're thinking about the future, that they're thinking about what their life is and what their next steps are. And so I don't think that you have to have a specific specialty or subspecialty rather in mind as you're interviewing. But I do think that it's an important part that you think about what's my 2 to 5 year plan? What's my 10-year plan? You know, what do I want to get out of this career in anesthesiology? And I think if you take it from that perspective, that can be really helpful, particularly when I'm as an associate program director, trying to figure out how does my program meet the kind of goals that you're trying to seek out of your career. And so I do think that going through that process of considering what you want to do into the future, including fellowship, including what that practice is going to look like, whether it's private practice, whether it's academics, whatever that looks like, I think it's important to at least have that thought. And yeah, that's so at the end of the day, that's what I'm looking for, is I want individuals that are going to be thinking about the next steps. So I don't think you have to have a definitive fellowship in mind, but think about what you want.
Dr. Patton, going to ask a different question. Definitely take advantage of the time that we have you here for applicants, because we've all in some way, shape, or form reviewed personal statements, looked at CVs, talked with mentees. For you, what makes an applicant to anesthesiology stand out?
You know, it's a really tough one. Thanks for giving me this question. Honestly, it's hard to answer this question because when you answer this question at all, it sometimes programs you to think that this is what's needed in order to be, a stellar applicant or successful, when in actuality, there are many, many different things that I think would really different qualities I think would really make someone really stand out on an application. I think first and foremost, when you're putting your application together, you really want to try and do the best you can to tell your own story. Don't worry about everyone else's story. If you don't have, something really significant that happened in your life, or, something that sounds like super like, theatrical or interesting, don't worry. I mean, not everyone's, has that history or path. And just like what I say for medical students, you don't really want to think about it from a standpoint of what do I need to say to get their attention, or what do I need to say so that I can get a spot. Honestly, we don't know what you're bringing to the table. I mean, obviously, we expect someone to be a hard worker. We expect someone to be able to, obviously perform well under the stresses of the residency program. We want someone who is well-rounded, who has a lot of different experiences. Ultimately, at the end of the day, what I discovered, again, this is not me speaking from my organization, as in, as Dr. Bradley mentioned, I want to make sure that everyone knows these are my own thoughts, but as someone who actually is involved with the interview process, we really like to find people who have interesting qualities and really add to the diversity of our organization, and not just like, by what ethnicity or gender you might be. There's many different ways that someone can be diverse, obviously, but we want people who really are interesting people that are really going to be impactful in our communities. And anesthesiology, and by this is my personal bias, we're leaders in the perioperative space. I'm someone who has an MBA. I do a lot of things in our department, MBA related. I'm on our financial steering committee. I'm on my billing and optimization workshop. I'm on the practice management committee for the CSA and ASA. So I do a lot of things that are, sort of business oriented. And from, leadership to me is something that I think all of us as anesthesiologists, can play a role in. We're the leaders in this space. We are the captains, quote unquote, of the ship. Everyone thinks it's the surgeons, but obviously there's a lot that we do in the operating room and outside that really has a profound impact on this space. And so if you really just think about sort of like how you can be impactful, or what are some of the qualities you have that really allow us to see that you're going to be someone who's coming into this that's going to really be able to really have a profound impact and really be able to lead well, and really be able to help us bring this anesthesia experience to the next wave. I mean, obviously everyone's trying to figure out what's next. We want people who are obviously going to be forward thinking, big researchers, or you don't have to be, that's a plus if you're someone who's a researcher. But if you're not, again, it's really hard to say specifically or hone in on one thing or even a few things that would make someone stand out. I just love reading personal statements and just getting to figure out who someone is. And that, if someone has a really interesting statement or really something interesting on their CV, it makes me and all of us want to get to know them and hear more. So just really think about that. Make sure you proofread, make sure you have folks looking at your resume and your CV and your application to really make sure that it speaks to who you are. And then, hopefully you get an interview, and that's really it. That's
a great pearl, because that personal statement can definitely hurt you if there's misspelled words, if it needs some work. I think this is an important question that we should probably camp out on for a second. I'd love to hear Dr. Okay's and Dr. Estime's thoughts on what makes an applicant stand out.
Oh, let's start with how you present yourself, which is your personal statement. And it really depends on the individual. I always say with your personal statement, be authentic, be yourself, tell your story, express why you're interested in interested in anesthesia, express what's interesting, what's amazing about it, what you want to change about it, how you want to contribute to the community. The other thing is letters of recommendation. There are certain keywords that we look for when we're evaluating those. For example, I strongly recommend so-and-so as to become part of your program. Things like that we're looking for. We can tell the difference between someone who really likes you compared to someone who does not. So do a really good job at screening those individuals that you're asking for your letters of recommendation. And then also with the interview process, make sure you get plenty of sleep, come in engaged, come in interested, come in with questions, let me know that you have reviewed at least our website so that you know what you're coming into and you can ask appropriate questions that is tailored to the program, not just generic ones. All of those things truly will help you stand out both during the application process and also during the interview process.
Yeah, I'll take this answer with I'll give sort of 2 points here. I think the first, which is something that both of our panelists thus far have highlighted, this is a match. Like this is almost like a relationship, like a long-term relationship. And the less real you are with who you are, the less likely you're going to match at a place that's going to be best for you. And so I think the more real you are, if you're somebody who just wants to go in and become an amazing clinician, then that probably needs to be your story. If you're somebody that wants to be a clinical, have clinical excellence, but also be an academic leader, then that should be part of your story. If you're somebody that wants to serve the community, that should be part of your story. Not every single program values the same things equally. And so ultimately, if you're being real in the process, hopefully you'll end up matching at the place that's going to be the best fit for your value system, because that should come out through the application process. That should come out through your ARIS, that should come out through your interview, that should come out through anything. So I guess the first point is just be real. The second one, I'll get straight to the point. How do you stand out? Signals. I mean, it's signals now. Like that's been the game changer for the past year or two. So I know that you're real if you drop a signal, and if you drop a gold signal. That's sort of what it is. And that's a whole other game that I'm sure we're going to get into in a little bit. But ultimately, if you want to stand out, my eyes as an associate program director are going to be open when I see that gold signal and I'm saying, okay, this person is serious about my program.
I didn't know they were color coded now.
Yeah.
This year. Yeah.
It's a whole new experience.
It's a whole new thing. Yeah.
Let's well, we're here. So let's talk about the signals and how people can hopefully use those to their advantage. Let's see.
Well, I guess I opened up the topic, so
yeah,
I will continue on it. So as a little bit of backdrop, what a signal is, that came out in the 2022 application cycle. And during the 2022 application cycle last year, when you were submitting your ARIS application, you could select up to 5 programs that you signal, that you basically put a mark on to say, I'm really interested in your specific program. There's also signals where you can do geographic preference, where you can sort of select a couple of different places and say, hey, I'm interested in the West Coast or East Coast or Midwest or whatever it is, and they break it down into some pretty specific regions. But generally speaking, I think the one that probably matters most is going to be that program-specific signal. Because that worked very, very well in matching programs with applicants that were actually really interested in their program, they've expanded that model, and they have taken it this upcoming year, so 2023, to 5 gold signals and 10 silver signals. So you have a total of 15 signals that you can spend on any program that you want to. Now the question comes, how do you best apply, or how do you strategically implement those signals? That's a good question, because at least for anesthesiologists, this will be our first go around with doing that, as program directors and as somebody that is trying to sort of provide guidance to students. I guess I have some thoughts, but the reality is that we don't really know how it's going to shake out, because this is the first year that we're doing it.
It's really funny. I think, from the geographical discussion and the signaling, this is something that I felt was going to come from the pandemic. We were talking about kind of what was going to be the aftermath, and obviously with mostly everything being virtual and an inability for folks to really get around and visit sites, everyone's probably, going to apply very, very broadly. So how do you give yourself an advantage? And this could be one of those things. I can tell you for sure. I mean, this is not a secret. Again, I'm not saying anything that was against any recruiting guidelines or anything like that, but it does matter for places like, where I am, that you want to be there. I mean, obviously, if you share with us via signaling that UCLA is a place that you're really interested in. I mean, we have a lot of people who apply to California programs, it definitely is something that matters. Now, that alone may not be obviously the thing that makes or breaks the difference. I mean, obviously having ties to certain areas and relationships to certain areas, understanding the community and whatnot is really important. That extra work that was discussed, going a little bit above and beyond to really understand some of the things that are going on in certain areas may show, again, you may not really have a full understanding, but it shows that you're obviously trying to make an effort to really get to connect with that community. But yeah, these signaling opportunities are going to be really interesting, because that didn't exist when I applied or when Dr. Bradley applied, and we all applied. I mean, this is a new thing. So it'll be interesting to see how strategically it plays out, and what how it's actually used by various departments. I'm sure people won't share all their secrets, right? They got to keep some things to the chest, but I'll find out for sure. At least where I am, I know everyone will find out where they are. But it'll be really interesting to see how this plays out. But definitely, I heed to our folks who are obviously involved more in recruitment than I am, whatever advice they have, because they're going to be able to share better. But I would just say, really think about it. I mean, anytime something like this comes out, especially if it's new, you really want to really have a good conversation with some folks that you can, and that you trust, and that you might be able to pick their brain about how this might affect your positioning. Especially, like, let's say, for example, again, you're on the East Coast primarily. Everyone you know is on the East Coast. You're applying West because you just want to come to California. It's like, okay, well, you have, how's that going to work out for you? To make yourself stand out from all the folks who already live in California and everyone else who's applying. So this is going to be a really interesting opportunity.
Dr. Okay.
I support what everyone has said. I don't really know much about the signaling process. A lot of my mentees have brought it up, but we'll see.
Awesome.
I guess I'll say a couple things more to Dr. Patton's point. I think I do want to emphasize that just because you give a gold signal to a program isn't an automatic spot to interview. You still have to meet whatever criteria that particular program is looking at. The way that I sort of think about it is, if you give a signal, especially if you give a gold signal, that will take your application, which may have gotten lost in the shuffle, and it'll probably bring it up to the top of the list. And it'll be the first application that everybody looks at. And they'll probably look at it in a lot more granular detail than they may have otherwise been able to do, especially when you've got 1,500 or 2,000 plus applications coming to you as a program. So that'll bring your application up to the top. And then, then it'll be up to that particular program to figure out whether you're going to be a good match or a good fit with that program. And then they will consider whether they're going to offer you an interview or not from there. But it is not an automatic interview. So I don't want to give that false impression. I think the other big thing that was highlighted as well is you got to be real with yourself as you're trying to think about where you're going to apply and how you're going to spend your gold signal, your silver signals, or whatever else you're going to do. You have to be real with yourself, and probably more realistically, you got to have somebody keep it real with you. That means a mentor who understands the application process, that can actually look at your application and say, these are your strengths, these are your weaknesses, this is where you sort of fall along the spectrum of competitiveness in anesthesia, and these are things that you may want to these are places that you may want to consider applying, and these are ways that you may want to potentially do it. So I think you got to have somebody keep it real with you, because sometimes we don't always keep it real with ourselves. We either undershoot, overshoot, or somewhere in between.
It's great advice. We're going to switch gears and talk about the terrible R word, which was brought up, research. But before we do, a horror story with signals. I had a mentee this past season, and this person, there's a difference between the mentor that you meet on social media or through Facebook or Twitter, and then somebody that's at your institution that is really invested and you go to and knows your application in and out. So I had this mentee assigned. We talked once or twice, and little did I know they had put all their signals into the top tier Ivy League baskets. So when this individual came to me eventually, like halfway through the season, the interview season, it was like, hey, I don't have any interviews. And that was when I said, well, let's look at your information. Let's look at your personal statement. Let's look at your CV. And based on the CV, it's like, hey, you don't meet what are likely the parameters to be considered at these institutions. So this person that put all their signals in one basket, so to speak, and I think they ended up not matching. I think they got into a prelim position, but definitely seek advice. And this was fantastic advice that these three panelists have given. Switching gears to research. This is it's going to get a little personal, which I'll share. I'll share, and then however you all feel. When I applied to anesthesia way back in 2013, I was applying. I had two pieces of research on my application. One was a poster that I'd done, and one was some bench research that I had done during my master's program. So nothing during medical school. I'm not very good at research, although Dr. Estime has worked to change that. He's put me to work on some papers. Our buddy Adam Milam has put me to work.
By the way, the due date is the end of the week, right? You know that, right? Sorry, I had to throw that out there.
Yeah, I do owe you a draft, but I applied with very little research, and that's something that always comes up, especially as the match becomes more and more competitive. So my question for the panelists, we'll start with Dr. Patton, then Dr. Okay, and tell me if I'm saying your name wrong. I'm trying to say it. I want to make sure I say it correctly. Okay.
I will take it. I appreciate any effort.
Okay. So we'll go from Patton to Dr. Okay, and then Estime. Can you talk about research and how it helped your application, and then what your thoughts are in today's matching landscape?
Yeah, it's always interesting, right? I just really say this. First and foremost, priority number one is going to be do the best you can in school, right? To do the best you can in medical school, do the best you can in residency. You can't do research at the expense of you doing well in medical school or during in residency. I mean, does it help if you have a research background, if you're someone who's well published or someone who's obviously shown a big interest in research? Of course, I mean, you're applying to academic programs who have scholarly missions. There are many programs like mine at Stanford who actually have a research track. So there are residents or med students who apply for that, research track. Similar things exist at other institutions as well. I was not someone who had a ton of research. As a medical student, I was able to do some things with some of our anesthesiologists at UC Irvine who were involved in perioperative surgical home. So I did some stuff with them. And I also did some research when I was an undergrad at UC Irvine as well, doing some bench work. But that, just like Dr. Bradley, that was really it for me. I was someone who was very active on campus, did a lot of leadership stuff. I served on various different committees, did a lot of diversity and health equity work while I was in medical school and residency. So that kind of was the path that I took. There are certain paths that you're going to take when you're in your medical or graduate medical training. It may not be a research track, and that's okay. Just like as an attending anesthesiologist, a faculty anesthesiologist, there are different tracks for me as an anesthesiologist at UCLA. Research is one track. I'm not on that track. So I think really speaking to what you are really passionate about, to me, is more important, because if you're putting research on your application and you're involved in research, but you don't really have a passion for it and you can't really speak very passionately about it, that's going to come out in your application. That's going to come out in your interview, right? But yeah, I mean, if you have an opportunity to do research, you have mentors that are able to sort of get you involved in research, open your mind to it, say yes, figure out if it's something that you have the bandwidth to do, because it will only help you, of course, if you perform well and you're able to get a letter from that research faculty, which is really important. Again, was the mention of letters. You got to really think about strategy here. You're doing the research to build up your CV. You're also looking to get a letter out of this. You're also looking to be able to speak about it in a passionate way when you're interviewing. It has to come out in many different times throughout this journey. When you get involved with research. So I wasn't a big researcher, but I understand, obviously that some folks are really interested. I'm becoming one now, just like Dr. Bradley. People are starting to get me into it. And also because I have some questions that I want to answer in terms of health equity and some of the things that I'm doing in research, or sorry, in regional, that's going to maybe require me actually even to potentially get a master's, because I have an MBA, but I'm an academic anesthesiologist who's interested in climbing up the ranks in academia. And these are some of the things I have to think about. But I think as a medical student or a resident, you really, again, focus on on really making sure you do really well in your training, and making sure you do really well in school. And if you have opportunities to do research, because again, not everybody has really big undergraduate or medical schools that have research opportunities. Some people, depending on where you are in the country, that might not be a very big option. So you might have to look outside of your organization, outside of the medical school, to even find it, right? So just really be passionate about whatever it is you get involved with. And if you have an opportunity to get involved in research, really try and stick with it. And that really, to me, when I'm reading an application, I see someone's done research for extended period of time. They have this faculty that their PI that they've been working with that, obviously can speak really well to knowing them on a more intimate level in terms of what you're doing in that lab. That's really where you're going to really see big benefit.
I think as medical students, definitely do research. And the reason why I say definitely is because anesthesia is very competitive now. And I think if you want to be able to cast a wide net, you want to at least have one research opportunity, maybe a presentation at a conference. My experience applying into anesthesia is going to be completely different from yours. With mine, I had one research on my CV, 2 presentations at a conference, but a lot of leadership roles and a lot of community service and a lot of mentorship and all of those things, and a few awards here and there. But I think in the culture that you guys are in, and with the competition that I am hearing about, yes, please find a research opportunity, get your name on a presentation, so that way you're giving yourself the best chance of being successful. Now, once you pass that stage and you're now at whatever residency program you're at, then you can then decide which pathway you want to go. And once you get to that residency part, you can choose your own path, because not everyone in anesthesia do research. Not everyone in anesthesia want to do research. I do not want to do research. However, I am very engaged in other things on the national level. For example, diversity, equity. I do difficult airway on the national level. I have leadership roles at work. I've always had leadership roles at work. And I can do quality improvement projects. However, I will not write the paper. Once you get to the attending level, there are so many options that you don't really have to put yourself in a box. But at the medical school level, my advice would be to at least have those things on there, so that you so that you are an applicant that most schools are going to want to look into and would be interested in talking to. But also, that doesn't mean that you should come in and say you're interested in research if you're not. It is okay if you're not interested in research, but it doesn't hurt to at least see whether or not you will be interested by trying.
I think I'll offer a little bit of a contrarian view to that. I think you got to be real with yourself. Yeah. And I think number one, and I think Dr. Patton said this as well too, you gotta go into medical school and handle your business, which means you need to do as good of a job as you can during your clinical rotations. I mean, even first and second year. I know most of that's pass fail now, but you got to do really well first and second year. You got to really shine during that third year, because at this point, when I'm looking at applications, that's sort of the only place that I can really judge what your clinical performance is going to be, or I'm forced to at least interpret your clinical performance based on how you do on these core rotations: surgery, internal medicine, OBGYN. I mean, all those things really matter. And so I think your job is to do as well as you can academically. That means that includes knocking out the steps. If you can take the steps and you can study strategically, all that stuff matters, because you can do whatever you want. You can find the cure for cancer, but if you've sort of failed at most of the other parts, it makes it hard. It just makes it harder. So not impossible, but harder. That being said, if you've been able to be successful during your actual academic training, then I think it's a question for you. It's a question of, what do you want to do with your time? When I'm going through somebody's application, I'm sort of looking at it as, what does this person do with their time outside of like studying? You know, is it hard? Is it research? Is that what they're doing? And if it is research, what has that journey been? Is this something that they want to continue in the future? Is it advocacy work? Is this where the person has chosen to spend the majority of their time? And what have they done with that work? How have they grown in that role? How have they been productive in that role? Have they disseminated knowledge in that role? You know, has it been on being engaged within their local medical school community? Are they on boards? Are they, you know, on whatever, like executive board memberships? Are they getting involved in clubs? Like, how exactly are they spending their time? And so I don't think that you necessarily have to do research, but you should be able to show what you've done with your time and have a story as to why that's important to you and how that sort of ties in with what you want into the future.
That's fantastic information. I'm going to answer the question briefly that was in the chat, and this is it kind of hits close to home. As a first generation medical student and then going into residency, Rachel Domingos asked, as an M3, she's interested in anesthesia. Are the skills inherent to anesthesia practice, such as intubating, placing chest tubes, etc., able to be taught, or should students entering residency have a firm grasp in these skills at a school without an anesthesia residency and few opportunities of practice? This is a good question, because this is kind of the feeling that I had, that I should step into residency and know how to do these things. And I'm compared to my peers who know all these things, know what a delta gap was. I found out about that when I was an intern. Some people call it imposter syndrome, that I need to know how to do everything. But realize that when you see the anesthesiologist practicing, when you see a senior anesthesia resident, you know, in the OR doing their thing, that took years and years for them to gain those skills, to get that experience. And that is exactly the purpose for residency. Just like in medical school, you can look back. For me to keep going, I always look at the past. I look at what I was doing 6 months ago, and I could see how much progress I've made, or maybe I haven't made. And that's motivation to do better. But once you start residency, you're going to learn, know the basics of just taking care of a patient as an intern. And you're going to build on that foundation. And every procedure you do, every arterial line you place, IV, intubation, you're going to have somebody there working with you every step of the way, and you're going to gain those needed skills. All right.
Dr. Bradley.
Yeah, go for it.
I think, it's kind of funny that you mentioned this, because, this comes up often with us in terms of how do people excel on their sub internship rotations if they're doing one. I saw you have a question about a ways. More important than someone really knowing to do all the things that you're talking about from a technical standpoint, you really have to understand, again, that there's a strategy to this, right? It's very important for you to have situational awareness. It's very important for you to actually understand how to communicate, which, again, I recognize is very difficult. There's different kinds of people, right? Some of us are introverts, some of us are extroverts, some of us can be thrown into a room and really get along with just about anyone, and some of us take some time to warm up. All of these things are kind of important, unfortunately, for anesthesia, because unlike other specialties or subspecialties, we're one-on-one, right? So more important than you coming in and proving to me, which is actually sometimes it could be off-putting, that you already know how to do a bunch of stuff when we're obviously trying to train you to become an anesthesiologist over the course of 4 years. Really, it's going to be, for me, it's are you someone who's teachable, someone who's approachable, a good listener, that really understands situational awareness, that has a good, healthy understanding of your limitations? That's more important to me. Humility goes a long way. So yeah, I just want to make sure that, you don't feel the pressure of having to prove that you are someone who has all these skills that an anesthesiologist is supposed to have, at such an early time point in your career. Now, and by saying this, I actually ended up doing the advanced track at Stanford. So that means I was actually not with my colleagues for a whole year. We have 2 tracks, and if you're applying, you probably already know this. There's an advanced and categorical. Categorical residents spend all of their time at the institution where they're doing their residency. So intern year and the 3 anesthesia years, maybe longer if you're doing another research track or peds anesthesia, whatever. For me, I stayed at Irvine and did my intern year. And so by the time I got to Stanford, I mean, my colleagues, my co-residents had already known all the other surgery interns. They've already done a full and a month of anesthesia with the program, because that's sort of built into the intern year. I didn't have any of that. Just like Dr. Bradley saying, I came in like not knowing anything about the Bay Area, didn't know anything about like all the things that my colleagues already knew. They had all these friends and whatnot. So it was different for me. But at the same time, like we were all pretty much finishing with like, you know, the ability to go out and be great consultant anesthesiologists. There's a reason why residency takes as long as it does, right? I mean, after 1 month, you'll do more intubations than anyone probably in the entire hospital, but you're still not ready yet to be your own anesthesiologist, right? Like it takes time. So don't stress and worry about all these things that are really not in your control. I think just really understanding how you can best position yourself in the strategy behind things is what we're kind of alluding to, is more important than trying to like think about the race at the finish line before you even go through the meat of it.
It's great.
I think Dr. Bradley, one of the things that she mentioned was that she's at an institution where she's not getting a lot of practice or exposure, which I think is the key point here. And if that's the case, in order for you to then catch up to everyone else, it is okay for you to watch those YouTube videos so you know how, but you also want to learn why we do all of those things. I think oftentimes what happens is we get a lot of residents that know how to do it, but they don't know why, and they don't know what situations you want to do it in. So I want you to look at those videos. I want you to have an idea of what we're doing and why we're doing it. So that way you come in a little bit more confident into your residency program. But I also want you to be teachable at the same time, because there's only so much information that you can get online or get through the textbook. And then there's certain things that we do a little bit differently in practice. So I think in your particular case, it is okay for you to look it up, read about it, so that when you do come in, you don't have that fear factor affecting you.
Dr. Okay, I think that kind of segues into away rotations. We'll probably, if you could talk about that, and then Dr. Estime can talk about his philosophy on away rotations, and then we might have a couple minutes to talk about some of the diversity issues we may face as anesthesiologists.
Sorry, Dr. Brown, am I taking that right now, or is it going back there? Okay.
Oh yeah, Dr. Okay, could you talk about away rotations and what your thoughts are?
Oh yes, sorry. So away rotations, I actually think it's a good idea when you can get it. I understand that sometimes it can be a little difficult now. And the reason why I think it's important is because it lets you see the environment you will be potentially working in. Whether or not you think it's going to be an environment you can thrive in, whether or not it's going to be an environment you'll feel supported in, whether or not it's an environment you'll feel that you'll learn in. The other thing is it's also a great opportunity to put your best foot forward. And so assuming you do well, you come prepared, you speak from a very intellectual part of your mind, and it's an opportunity for you to match into a program as well. I think when you are doing away rotations, paying attention to those things is important. And especially as a minority student, paying attention to micro and macro aggression would be very important while you're there too, because it will really give you clues as to what your experience is going to be. Yeah, I hope I answered your question.
I think the away rotation has become a trickier question than it has in the past. I think, again, because of the signals, a lot of people, traditionally, the away rotation was a way to differentiate yourself from everybody else. Mm-hmm. And to signal, that's sort of what people used to do to signal a program, was to do an away rotation there. And I think that if you're doing it strictly to signal a program, obviously we have a less expensive route to do that. And a lot of places also Even if you do an away rotation, actually the ACGME is requiring this, or the ABA, I can't remember which guiding body, but even if you do an away rotation, I think it's the American Board of Anesthesiology still says you need to, programs still require individuals to provide a signal. It cannot be used in lieu of a signal. And so if you're trying to use it in lieu of a signal, just understand that's not what the away rotation is meant for. Now, the away rotation can be incredibly helpful. I think, number one, if you don't have an anesthesia program at your home institution, then absolutely do one so that you get a flavor of what anesthesia is, what the nuts and bolts are. I think you should do one when you want to try to confirm whether this is a program that is actually of interest to you, because you're going to get an inside look at this program unlike any other way that you would, particularly now that there's no in-person interviews. I mean, there's no in-person interviews, so you're just meeting everybody through Zoom. That's not really a great way to gauge the culture, the climate, not the unsaid things within a department. So if you're really considering a program and it's beyond just you're trying to signal your intent, then I think it can be incredibly helpful. Now, it can also hurt, right? I mean, it depends on your performance, and it depends on how you perform there. I think we talked a lot about being teachable as one of the most important tools to evaluate what your competitiveness is, and I think that's an important part. I think when you're on an away rotation, more than just like knowing the answer to everything or knowing how to intubate somebody, to me, what's more important is like, are you nice? Are you pleasant? Like, are you a nice person to be around? Do you work hard? Like, are you staying late? Are you volunteering yourself to stay late? Are you engaged? So are you asking a lot of questions? Are you talking to everybody? Are you impressing not just your attendings, but are you working and are you being really nice to the residents, the other medical students that you're on rotation with, the janitors that are cleaning the floors? I mean, the nurses, like all these things come into play. And so when you're going to do your away rotation, make sure that you're keeping yourself together in all aspects, because all of it is really ultimately being used to judge who you are as a person and your potential for the future.
Great. We have a couple minutes left. We have 7 minutes left to be exact. Why don't we go around and just take about 1 minute each to talk about how you've successfully navigated medical school, residency, your career as an attending anesthesiologist, as a Black or African-American identifying anesthesiologist. We'll start with Dr. Patton and then Dr. Okay, and then Dr. Estime.
Very difficult question. As you know, you look around as you go further along, there's less people who look like us. But, I do think that we're making some strides. I just want to quickly say it's a good question, but there was something on my mind, Dr. Bradley, real quick that I wanted to mention is when you're going away with rotation, if you are going to do one, it's not just us who are paying attention to you, right? So we work very closely with people in the operating room on a daily basis. So if you do something potentially offensive, God forbid, or something happens that, the nurses pick up on, circulator or whoever, like that information does come back to us. So you really want to just make sure that, as Dr. Estime was saying, you're really like trying to be a nice person, nice to everyone. You're really being humble because we do talk to our colleagues. But for me, I think I've been very fortunate and blessed to have mentors. I think having mentors is really important. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to be a minority in this space, and really any advanced degree for any advanced degrees because. Although we've made a lot of strides, there's just a lot of challenges. But I will say that mentorship helped me a lot. I've had some pretty big allies that were not minorities or not African American who also helped open some doors for me and really saw the potential in me and really helped sort of get me to the point to where I am today. I think showing up and being available is really important. One thing that I always like to advise students and residents, be active. Look, I'm someone who's very active, as was mentioned. By some of us. And so I understand I have that bias. But for example, at our annual meeting every single year, and Dr. Bradley knows I bring this up, there's a very important opportunity for those who are looking to apply to anesthesia residency. It's called the Residency Program Meet and Greet. There's also one for fellowship as well, but the residency program meet and greet is 2 hours. It's always on Saturday and it's sometime in the late afternoon. Every single program in the entire country shows up to this. Now, I understand there's financial constraints. If you're someone who's not able to get to San Francisco this year because you're on the East Coast or you have some rotation that you're doing, I get it. But if you're able to get there, you're able to get support from your, from people to help you get there. It is a very valuable opportunity because you can really do a lot to sort of, again, make yourself stand out. I did those things. I really tried to go and do all the different things that I could to sort of show my face and network and connect with folks. I'm an extrovert, so I love to do these kinds of things. But it's helped really open up a lot of doors, in terms of where I am now is, and what I'm doing in my career. So really, just be open to meeting people. Really work really hard. Show up. Find a mentor. Stick with and it might change over time. But really, the person may change over time because they may be a mentor for a season. But really mentorship. I can't speak any more highly of it. When you're someone like us, I'm guessing a lot of people on this call are minority of minority descent. Really having folks who have been there, done that, sort of guide you is really important.
Great advice.
My advice is to not only have a mentor, but a sponsor. Look that up when you are done off this call. The mentor will guide you. The sponsor will bring your name up at the table. And I will tell you, once I got a sponsor, a lot of doors opened. And you will be surprised what opportunities come up once you have the right sponsor and mentor. The other thing is, I think having a discussion about the early years of attendinghood, that would be an entirely new segment. Especially navigating everything. I can tell you, as I think this will be my 4th year of attendinghood. My first 2 years were very challenging. The things, it was very challenging. But I think what ended up changing my experience is letting go of the imposter syndrome part. I think that changed things for me, and really remembering who I was in medical school and residency and fellowship, kind of reminding myself that, yes, I'm a badass. And I had to tell myself that, and not letting all the other things bring me down, but also reading books. For example, I think the one I'm reading right now is called Crucial Conversations, which really addresses how to have those difficult and challenging conversations, especially when people are making racially charged comments, or you're experiencing micro and macroaggressions on a regular basis, how to address those without being confrontational or without allowing your emotions to play into it. Learning those skills, I think, have changed my experience the most, but also being confident enough to do it has really impacted my experience. And I think as residents, I would encourage you to read that book too. I would encourage you to have a safe space where you can have these conversations and kind of role play how to have those conversations. One of my best friends is my former program director. She and I would do this on a regular basis because the experience she's had are the same experiences that I'm having. And so that has been probably the best experience or the best things that have really impacted my experience as a resident, fellow, and more importantly, as an attending. There's a lot of information out there. IERS has a leadership track or leadership series and webinar that really focus and discuss a lot of these items too. I know ASA has some leadership tracks too, but my most recent experience was with IERS. There was a webinar that I thought was very impactful. So reach out to your national society, look at the resources, look at the articles, because there's a lot out there, and be informed.
Fantastic. Dr. Estime, I know we started a couple minutes late, so I don't know if hopefully
about 30 seconds. I had three basic rules that I kind of followed throughout my entire life, probably. I worked twice as hard to get half as far. And that's the honest mentality that I've got, is I just try to outwork everybody. So it's working twice as hard to get half as far. I think the second part is that I'm always looking to improve myself. I never think I'm a master at anything. I never think that I got all the answers. I never think that this is the definitive. I'm always looking to improve myself. And then number 3 is optimism, and trying to see the good in every single situation, no matter how bad it is. And I think those 3 tips that I've sort of applied in my life have taken me a far way.
Fantastic. I want to respect everyone's time. Thank you to our incredible panelists. I'm so inspired, and these folks are the real deal to succeed in our career, in our line of work. Certainly overcome some obstacles in their path, and so happy to call them all peers. Hopefully we'll all connect at some point. Several of them have put their contact information in the chat below. Definitely, reach out. I know Dr. Estime on Twitter is or X is posting kind of some tips on navigating the match. Dr. Patton, we call him Hollywood. He's got an active social media presence. So thank you all so much for coming out. Also, shout out to Tour for Diversity, Dr. Cameron Matthews, for organizing this webinar. With that, I'll just give a couple minutes so everybody can kind of write down this contact information.
Thank you. I'm going to go see some patients now.
Fantastic. I'll leave you with one last tip as you guys are writing down this contact information. As you're wrapping up your time in medical school, I always recommend you look for a very easy away rotation. I did radiology in Florida. I had a buddy whose couch I crashed on, so I didn't have to pay for housing, but it was a very relaxed month. It kind of doubled as vacation, and I learned some radiology. So find somewhere that's not cost prohibitive, maybe get away for a month as you wrap up your medical school. Thank you all for coming and joining us this evening, and hope you have a wonderful evening and successful in the match.
Thanks for having us, Steve. Take care.
All right.
Dr. Bradley.
Yes, ma'am.
You do ethics?
I do.
How did you get, sorry, I know.
Let me see if I can